There are 4 great gods of evil in the Warhammer setting. All are dark and terrible. All are things of nightmares. But one holds a secret that few know. For in all of the universe, the dark gods Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Khorne fear only one thing. It is their younger sibling, Slaanesh. Welcome, gentle listener, I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the Warhammer setting in all its glory and dark horror. And today, I intend to guide you through the very basics of a figure that is central to all 3 of the Warhammer settings. The world that was, the realms and Age of Sigmar, and finally, the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. I have foregone a tale today, as otherwise the entry would be suffocatingly long, and also because I am bending all of my will to improving other pieces of writing, which you shall see soon. So, lend me your ears on this one, for today we are to discuss Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, one of the 4 dark gods of chaos. But in my mind at least, he, she, it is rather different to its siblings. Now do be aware that we also have channels covering mythology and natural history, so if our presentations are to your liking, do consider giving them a try as well. Content is coming out at a slightly less Herculean pace, as we are only in our infancy on those channels, but why not get in at the start? See how we develop, because as we all know, I do like to try and to push the envelope, and do try to improve as things go on. Links in the description. That over. And so, for the very basics, let us lean on some of that existing wisdom. But do stick around, as I am sure you will find some nuances that give a new complexion to the knowledge of even an experienced fan of Warhammer. So let's have at it. Slaanesh in Warhammer Fantasy. The world that was. The Circles of Seduction. The Dark Prince's realm is divided into 6 domains, arranged in concentric circles around Slaanesh's Palace of Pleasure. This domain is commonly thought a paradise by the mortal souls lured here, but nothing is precisely what it seems. Each region is formed around one of the 6 deadly seductions: avidity, gluttony, carnality, paramountcy, vainglory, and indolence. These circles are not only a continuous celebration of Slaanesh's needs and desires, but also his chief defense. An intruder must pass through each of the 6 circles in turns before reaching the palace within. An act of will that few souls, mortal or demonic, can perform. As one moves from circle to circle, the desire to succumb becomes increasingly overwhelming. Once mortals have sampled the pleasures of Slaanesh's realm, they cannot stop. Compelled towards excess, they think nothing of the consequences, only of the pleasure that indulgence brings. Some, much too late, discover the trap that has been set for them. But this matters not to Slaanesh, who finds moans of ecstasy or cries of horror equally satisfactory, providing they are heartfelt. The Circle of Avidity forms the outermost boundary of Slaanesh's domain. The temptations within its borders seek to awaken an interloper's sense of greed. Gold is here, ingots and coins beyond counting. Precious stones are sunk deep into every wall, and gilded sculptures line every path. All who attempt to seize this wealth are doomed, The gemstones hatch demonic birthlings that burrow beneath the skin and eat their victim from inside to out. To lay but a finger upon Slaanesh's statuary is to join it, your consciousness rendered immortal, but forever trapped in an immobile golden body. Should greed not ensnare, then the next circle is that of gluttony, with sumptuous banquets and rivers of wine. A single taste reduces the imbiber to a bloated fool whose only desire is to gorge until his tortured body gives way under the strain. Beyond the circle of gluttony lies that of carnality, a debauched place where all manner of fleshly pleasures may be sampled. Lissom maidens walk the verdant fields, their face and form seemingly sprung from heart's dearest desire. Yet to tryst with such a creature is purest folly, for there are clawed hands and serpent's teeth beneath the glamour, and an appetite for fleshly pleasures of a different sort. Upon entering the next circle, the traveller is greeted by the roar of an adulating crowd, for this is the circle of paramountcy, where intruders are tempted with power and all its application. Armies, their numbers so great as to blacken the plains, greet those of martial bent, while the politically minded are also met in kind, with nations to guide and vassals to rule. For any traveller with a desire for personal power within his heart, this is a paradise of sorts for a time, a place where every whim is obeyed and every command fulfilled. Yet to tarry within this circle is to be overcome with paranoia, to see a dagger beneath every smile and poison in every chalice. The cheering throng becomes a torturous, inescapable prison. The circle of vainglory is a garden, its maze of paths thick with beautiful flowers and heavy with thorns. Here, unseen voices whisper reminders of past glories, of achievements great and small. Most deadly of all is the remembrance of circles conquered and temptations unheeded. Each step an intruder takes with pride in his heart leads him further from his path, drawing him deeper and deeper into the choked undergrowth. There he swiftly falls prey to the tearing briars and roots, whilst the chanting thorn children of the garden weave his every failure into a mocking epitaph. Last and most dangerous is a circle of indolence, a serene domain of heavenly choirs and perfumed seas, all within this circle where the root and branch or stock and stone works to lull the mind and senses. A single draught of the ambrosial waters can rob a mortal of purpose and will. To sleep here is to never again awaken. The lone and level sands that crunch underfoot are the desiccated husks of all those who have succumbed, and their ethereal voices are their souls in torment. If this final and most insidious of circles is traversed, then a traveller can finally ascend to the seat of Slaanesh's power. Slaanesh does not have a stronghold as such, merely a luxurious palace wherein his demon followers pay court. This shimmering Alcazar haunts the dreams and nightmares of mortals in a way that no other place can. It is said that contests in every manner of excess are to be found within the palace, and its fleshy walls pulse to the rhythm within. These debauched competitions occur in 6 great halls, each cavernous chamber devoted to one of the 6 deadly seductions of Slaanesh. Such are the incredible depths to which these earthly sins are pursued, that their practitioners pass beyond pleasure into torment so terrible that only the truest devotees of Slaanesh can take joy in them. The Prince of Chaos. Of all the dark gods, Slaanesh alone is divinely glamorous, long-limbed and elegant, and with a haunting and androgynous beauty. It is impossible for a mortal to look upon their divine face without losing his soul, for all who see Slaanesh become slaves to his slightest whim. Slaanesh can assume male, female, or hermaphrodite form at will, though he mostly manifests himself as a young man, clean-limbed and fresh with the vigor of youth. Slaanesh is seductive as only an immortal can be, disarming in his innocence, utterly beguiling in his manner. The sensual pleasures of art, music, and companionship fascinate Slaanesh, and he is drawn to mortals possessed of physical beauty and charm. Unlike the other Chaos Gods, Slaanesh goes out of his way to court the affections of mortals, seeking to ensnare their souls in his web of excess. As such, his palace of pleasure is not home solely to demons and damned souls. It also entertains those mortals Slaanesh wishes to tempt. Though Khorne is the only god with an open dislike to Slaanesh, both Nurgle and Tzeentch are uneasy in his presence. This is due in part to the fact that all the Chaos Gods embody Slaanesh's drive for excess. Khorne with his rage, Tzeentch with his schemes, and Nurgle with his love of pestilence. Lurking deep within the psyche of each of Slaanesh's brother gods is the suspicion that the influence of the Dark Prince is steadily gaining in strength, and that Slaanesh will perhaps one day eclipse them all. Slaanesh in the Age of Sigmar. The most insidious of the Chaos Gods, Slaanesh embodies the dark fates born from obsession. His will does not descend screaming upon his victims, nor manipulate them like some uncaring cosmic force. Instead, it nestles intimately within the soul, corrupting the secret hearts of mortals until they ultimately doom themselves. Long ago, when the dreaming cultures of the realm spheres took form, the glimmering potential of the mortal realms attracted the eye of a wanton god. That entity was Slaanesh. At that point, grown powerful beyond measure on a stolen ambrosia of elven souls. At the time of the shattering of the world that was, Slaanesh had glutted himself on the spirits of that ancient race to the point that only a pitiful few survivors escaped his hunger. He was all but incapacitated by the act of gorging himself so deeply. Where once he might have savoured each sinful soul that fell into his clutches, by eating so many millions of spiritual essences at one time, he became vast and swollen, well beyond the limits of Khorne's rage, Tzeentch's machination, and evil Nurgle's cosmic corpulence. Yet still, Slaanesh longed for more, always more. His appetite could never be sated, just as the stars would never cease to burn. The time of promise. As Slaanesh looked upon the mortal realms, he felt a yearning as never before. Tongues of solid ichor licked at tapering fingers that could feel every known sensation in the universe at one time. The gods shuddered in eager anticipation of the feasts to come, cascades of liminal unlight rippling through the ether to glimmer in 1,000 skies. Though he was all but stupefied by his epoch-ending feast, he had minions aplenty to do his perverse work in this new cosmos of realm spheres and criss-cross portals. For Slaaneshi demons of every kind had sprung into being as his power had grown. Here was a new beginning, a new stage for the endless acts of the great game to take place upon, to be performed with fresh vigor and imagination by those that would fall under his sway and never break free from it. 8 realities were slowly spinning in the void, each linked to the others by the works of long-lost civilizations. the Realm Gates. They represented 8 futures for Slaanesh to corrupt in his own image. 8 never-ending festivals of sensation to sample, to devour, to sully and spit back as twisted reflections of that which once had been pure. To the wide and avaricious eyes of Slaanesh, here was enough fodder to pass several eons of decadence without falling into repetition and ennui. Together the mortal realms represented a prize beyond measure. And so, Slaanesh emerged from his digestive lethargy to leer over that which one day would be his. He sent forth his minions in glorious cavalcades of excess, whooping and shrieking, as they pressed hungrily against the veil between worlds. But then Slaanesh spoke, and they fell silent. Billions of demons prostrate or sprawling, as his words stimulated every nerve, every sense, to the point of ecstatic agony. His command was for them to insinuate, to seduce, to inveigle and enchant, to bring about the corruption of mortals. So was the subtle war begun, and the demise of empires put into dread motion. The Dark One cometh. The minions of Slaanesh hunted out individuals who would fall most easily to his influence, and softly spoke into their minds. Their whispers, their seeds of disaster, found fertile ground in which to lodge and grow. For the mortal dwellers of these new realms were no more immune to temptation, obsession, and excess than the people of the world that was. At first, Slaanesh sent out only echoes of sensation, strange compelling scents and lilting tunes to presage his coming. As he grew more fascinated by these new realms, he bent more and more of his power towards his new feeding grounds. For a time, the mortal pitfalls of self-interest, willful delusion, and naivety did much of the work of concealing his influence. By the time Slaanesh's victims grew aware of his dark work, his cruel stoking of their obsessions had brought them to the point that they became all-consuming. As once simple people developed their civilizations, they no longer found pleasure in simple things. The laughter of their kith and kin, the feeling of sunlight upon their skin, and the joy of an ale well earned at day's end became no more thrilling than a spatter of mud as they trod their road to damnation. Slowly, but with gathering momentum, cults of luxury and selfishness blossomed behind closed doors. Through gilded halls and exotic debauches, Slaanesh's demons found their way in. The hidden cultist activity in the highest echelons of society, that worship that was not quite yet worship, came to a head. Cities writhed with vice. Secret cliques revealed themselves, exposing the extent of their spread through civic and military subcultures alike in shocking bloodbaths. Entire societies fell into downward spirals of murderous excess. The corruption of new empires accelerated to the point that even those who had no part in it found they could not escape. When the stuff of the Dark Prince's realm started to seep into reality, the patron god of all this degradation revealed himself through twisted works of art and mind-bending prose. Soon the name Slaanesh was spoken aloud in every nation. Demon and mortal supplicant rode side by side, vying to cause the most carnage possible in the name of the ever-indulgent Dark Prince of Chaos. So it was that the Hedonites were born, and a great portion of the mortal realms came to be claimed by Slaanesh. The Prince of Chaos. As with all Chaos gods, Slaanesh is given animus by mortal emotion. Where the other dark powers are crystallizations of specific elemental concepts, Slaanesh is lent form and power not by the nature of feeling and desires, but by the degree. Everything taken to excess empowers Slaanesh. Slaanesh is hence indefinable by mortal standards, perhaps more so than any other Chaos God. For his form and substance shift upon a whim. In the art of the depraved, he is sometimes presented as a parody of human desire. The deity is shown as a horned hermaphrodite, with one half male and the other female, or a perfect, smooth-limbed youth, without flaw but for the abyssal darkness of two staring hypnotic eyes. The Dark Prince is usually clad in sumptuous finery that exaggerates rather than conceals, though unlike his fellow gods, he takes pains never to appear the same way twice. Stranger portrayals can be found in the sculptures and drawings of Slaanesh's devotees. In the artwork of the gelded vizier, he is Oslan, an immensely obese glutton of indeterminate gender, with every inch of flesh covered in obscene tattoos. In the scrawlings of the lunatic Adayan Bahagidir, he is Slaanesh, a great white serpent made of writhing bodies, with 4 knife-tipped arms and a screaming face hidden by the stolen features of an impossibly serene woman. In certain Haitian schools of enlightenment, he is represented only by a melody, a strain of music written upon a 6-bar stave. For many elven survivors fear that the very act of speaking his name could draw his gaze. The Seraphon often depict him as an angular spiral, each twist in the icon symbolizing an act or decision that leads further downward into the abyss of corruption. The stargazers of Ulthar refer to him as Slaanesh, she who devours, an ever-staring eye surrounded by a vortex of shrieking maws. The Dark Prince is all these things, and so much more. Slaanesh is drawn always to the peripheries of the mortal realms, for there the nature of that reality is at its most extreme. At the perimeter inimical can be found the purest and most lethal incarnations of that realm's nature. For a mortal to stray there is to court transformative disaster of the most spectacular kind. These instances amuse Slaanesh no end. Of all the Chaos Gods, it is Slaanesh that seeks to claim the mutable, volatile territories at the edge of each realm sphere for his own. In many places, these surreal landscapes lead straight into Slaanesh's domain, and likewise, the domain of the Dark Prince bleeds over into the mortal realms. The Scions of Slaanesh. Those who pray at the altar of excess come from all walks of life, from primitive shamans to the warlords of the bloody tribes to the richest sophisticates of the new cities. The wanton indulgence of primal lusts appeals to many barbaric cultures, as well as many civilized ones. Musicians, artists, poets, and dancers can all be seduced by the desire to perfect their skills, in doing so to the exclusion of all else, even their own humanity. They find Slaanesh. The ranks of these artful sinners are swollen by lost souls addicted to certain substances and unwholesome acts. Those who gain momentary fulfillment from debauchery, only to find that they must surpass each former iteration of their indulgence to find true satisfaction. Some of those who keep their double lives or vices carefully hidden, upon reaching the point of no return, turn from secrecy to joyous and open celebration of that which once they sought so hard to hide. Those who think themselves infallible, or who rule with absolute authority, also gravitate towards Slaanesh, for the only thing true tyrants respect is an even greater tyrant, with the power to depose them. The inevitable truth. Though Slaanesh is arguably the youngest of the Chaos Gods, he was once the most powerful of their number, and will be again. He has learned to thrive on being underestimated, using the predictable contempt of Khorne, the generous sentimentality of Nurgle, the treachery of the horned rat, and the self-defeating complexity of Tzeentch to his advantage. In their more paranoid moments, his brothers have watched Slaanesh's conquests with great trepidation. They secretly fear that their own obsessions empower their brother. For at their simplest and most profound level, the dark gods are the embodiments of all-consuming ideals, mindsets, and emotions. There is always a suspicion that the Dark Prince will rise like a sin-soaked phoenix from the fires of incarceration to one day eclipse them all in power. Or worse, absorb them, making their excesses and obsessions part of his own and subsuming their territory into his sovereign realm. Each of the Chaos Gods tells himself that could never be, but in the darkest nights of the immortal soul, scintillas of doubt glitter even in their black hearts. And with that tiny concession to his supremacy growing within the minds of each of his rival gods, Slaanesh's journey to ultimate conquest has already begun. Yet at present, due to the machinations of the elves, their gods, Slaanesh has been captured, and souls have been forced from him to repopulate the elven kingdoms, servants to each of the 4 gods. But Slaanesh may reclaim them in time. Slaanesh, in the grim darkness of the far future. Slaanesh, in Warhammer 40,000. Slaanesh, also known as the Dark Prince, the Prince of Pleasure, the Lord of Excess, the Perfect Prince, and the Prince of Chaos, in the Imperium of Man, and she who thirsts amongst the Eldari, is the Chaos God of pleasure, hedonism, excess, and decadence. Lust, pride, and self-indulgence are the hallmarks of all who follow it. Slaanesh is the youngest of the 4 major Chaos Gods, having come to full sentience within the Immaterium only during the 30th millennium. The name Slaanesh is a corruption of the Eldari term Slaaneth, Sla meaning ecstasy or pleasure, and Neth meaning lord or prince in the Eldari lexicon. Hence, the Prince of Pleasure, though ironically, the Eldari refer to this foul entity as Slaanesh, she who thirsts. If the legends are to be believed, there was one being born into the warp from the depravity and corruption of an entire species. Over thousands and thousands of Terran years, the ancient Eldari, a race with souls of limitless passion and nearly limitless psychic ability, allowed themselves to be consumed with decadence. Because of their powers, passion, and unique connections to the Immaterium, the disturbances their depravity touched off were singularly dangerous. Even just this vague bit of knowledge is little more than rumor to most inhabitants of the galaxy. Still fewer are privy to the secrets hidden within the shrouded and nearly inaccessible vaults of the Black Library, the hidden craft world that is the ancient repository of Eldari knowledge located deep within the webway. Within these somber chambers, ancient manuscripts point to an unspeakable event that changed the galaxy forever. From the perverse thoughts, actions, and deeds of the Eldari, a new god was born. A very real god that was indeed a reflection of the species that unwittingly gave it life. Its violent birth signaled the eventual death of the species that gestated it. The tomes of the Black Library say that Slaanesh was born from the uncontrolled and excessive need for sensation that had come to preoccupy every moment of every day for nearly every Eldari. Through the incredible advanced technology and psychic mastery that the species had developed over the Terran millennia, they passed the days living in unimaginable luxury. They had no need to concern themselves with matters such as daily survival, manual labor, or warding off external threats. Nor did they feel bound by social constraints anymore. They had no need to think of how their actions would affect others, not even within their own families, since there would never be a time when they needed anything from them. Everything was at all times theirs. Even death had no meaning, for in that long-ago time before Slaanesh's birth, the souls of the Eldari possessed the ability to reincarnate from the immaterium into newborn members of their species soon after death. There was as yet nothing within the Empyrean to hunger after their souls. The passions that burned deeply within the Eldari's soul were unbound and freely explored to depths that other intelligent species could not fathom. A mind freed from all concerns of reciprocity, fear of reprisal or death, is able to turn fully inward and wander into unknown places, seeking previously unconsidered diversions and sensations. When an entire race unshackled its mind in this way, unusually powerful psychic energy was cast into the warp, and the unnatural essences that reside in the warp responded. The darkest moment of Eldari history, the Fall, is chronicled as a cautionary tale, one that the keepers of the Black Library, known as the Black Council, study continually. Their hope is that some path towards a return to ascendancy, or at least a way to avoid their species' ever-looming doom, can be found. The tale says that the vast majority of the members of the ancient Eldari species, unprepared as they were for the god their unbridled passion and perversion had birthed, were consumed in an instant. Their minds, and worse their souls, were connected to chaos in a way they could not have foreseen. They had become slaves to darkness, and when their newborn master hungered, the souls of the Eldari were forfeit as its sustenance. Slaanesh can see its hand at work across the galaxy in countless ways. The joy a parent feels when a child is born, the pride a commodore feels when his fleet executes a cunning battle plan, the stirring of a lover's heart when in the embrace of a paramour, the heady rush of pleasurable relief that reminds a soldier how good it feels to be alive after an unexpected skirmish. All these sensations, on some small level, are pleasing to the master of delights. But they are not enough. Though the decimation of the Eldari and its pursuit of the remaining few of their species is a source of great joy to Slaanesh, it has much, much grander desires to fulfill. Every breath is an opportunity to take a new scent. Each glass raised is a chance to savor a new flavor. On every battlefield, each chainsword blow can elicit a never-before-heard pain-filled scream. From its glittering palace in the Dark Prince's realm, the Lord of Excess revels in each new sensation discovered. It guides and directs the inhabitants of the galaxy to push ever onwards towards new heights of sensation. A god experiences existence on a level far beyond that of which a mortal can ever dream. But that does not mean Slaanesh is content to leave the galaxy to its own devices. It sees the stars, the planets, and indeed the very fabric of reality itself as a plaything, to be poked, prodded, ripped, and tightly bound to its will in order to squeeze out every last sensation there is to enjoy. Those who choose to serve it emulate Slaanesh as best they can, limited as they are by mortal form and mortal imagination. In every corner of the galaxy, worshippers of Slaanesh spend their time inventing new delights and challenging themselves to craft experiences for themselves that no one has ever had before. This can be something as base as eliciting a new reaction to a carnal entwining, or as high-minded as creating a masterwork of art so profound that it brings tears to all who behold it. The truly inspired, though, have much larger stages to play. Many of the factions of the Adeptus Ministorum and Adeptus Terra embody restraint and denial of base enjoyments. Knowing that the easiest path to corruption for most Imperial citizens is simply freedom, they impose harsh rules and ultimately a harsher existence on their people within the Imperium. For the greater good and the defense of all the Emperor has created, they dictate that each moment of a citizen's waking life be filled with labor, prayer, and punishment. They believe that a human mind left to reflect on anything else is liable to wander towards selfish thoughts and desires. To guard against the influence of the ruinous powers who use these thoughts as the crack through which they can claim a mortal soul, this cannot be allowed. There is a risk in this approach to order, for from it chaos is easily born. The merciless attentions of adepts, the harsh laws of planetary governors, and other agents of imperial laws have turned many who would otherwise never have embraced Slaanesh. A mind overwhelmed with hardship and unrelenting burden has no time for thoughts of sin, but when a moment comes, fleeting though it may be, it stands out against the darkness of life as a burning candle of possibility. For many who stray, sin is not an act undertaken for the sake of rebelliousness, but rather as a way to find relief. Relief from constant struggle, relief from dogmatic rules, relief from restraint. It is this relief that Slaanesh offers in over-generous amounts. It is not just the downtrodden people of the Imperium who feel the crush of hardship in a bleak and foreboding galaxy. War is a constant presence across the stars. Limitless numbers of beings compete for limited resources, creating conflict and strife everywhere. There are even humans who exist on the fringes of imperial rule, for whom life is little better than if they were fully under its yoke. The harshness of life in the Imperium Central is overwhelming, but it does at least offer a modicum of safety compared to frontier existence. Life is hard and cruel everywhere in the galaxy, and any chance to feel some comfort is very difficult to resist. A fact the Dark Prince exploits to its advantage at every opportunity. A bit of kindness, a moment of joy, is often all it takes to set a soul on the path to damnation. It is not just a reprieve from suffering that lures so many towards their doom in the wicked embrace of the Prince of Pleasure. Comfort is but one sensation in a myriad of possibilities. What of those who, like the Eldari of old, have experienced what it means to live a life of luxury? And now we get to the bones of the matter. Slaanesh is a combination of all of the other three gods, and yet not, as it is actually the god of the Eldar, as the Chaos gods are really, truth be told, predominantly the human gods, the other three. Yes, their span was always further than humanity, the Eldari, but it is humanity who have given them most form, as per the law. For Slaanesh is a life urge, but is that not a stolen or mimicked facet from Khorne? For lust is a natural experience merely enhanced to the nth degree. And Khorne is bloodlust, but he is also skill and courage. Thus he is lust, and the wish for perfection, if truth be told. Is Slaanesh anything but a poor and twisted copy of the traits of Khorne? He consumes, he devours, both the body and the soul, and his thoughts are like unto infections. Does he also not have traits stolen from mighty Nurgle? For it promises eternity in bliss, another escape as much as Nurgle's gifts. For in Nurgle there is immunity from pain due to its negation, but for the followers of Slaanesh, it is ease as it is turned to simple sensory input. An input that can be revelled in, can be enjoyed by the devout of the Prince of Pleasure. And is there anything as pathetically devious and conniving as the addict? A life of lies and veils, denials and subterfuge, all cloaked in the machinations of the addict to merely maintain that which holds them tight, no matter what the fixation may be. For any interest can become a fixation and then devolve into a thing of horror needed to be hidden, to be cultivated only at one's own expense. The constant plans needed must surely lean directly into Tzeentch's wheelhouse. Surely. Thus it can be said that perhaps Slaanesh is not the same as its siblings. Oh, the motive power, the well of souls, the immaterium, the warp, that which they are made of is the same. But are they truly equals in form and function? For in the oldest lore, the other three gods of chaos, Khorne, Tzeentch and Nurgle, were all created quite some time before Slaanesh. Not as the universe turns, of course. That was but a blink of the eye. But for sentient beings, for the timeline of activity, it was a long time indeed. For the three dark gods of chaos, fully realized by humanity, were birthed in the first and second millennium. Yet for Slaanesh, it was another 28 millennia before her birth cry would tear the galaxy asunder, destroying the Eldari homeworlds, near annihilating the race, and causing real space to burst and create a hole between it and the warp, the Eye of Terror. 28,000 or more years, while the Eldari ignored the universe and then fell in upon themselves. Longer? Strangely, even the rise of the Human Gold Age Federation did nothing to stop their ennui, their boredom. The cataclysmic battle against the Men of Iron, of which the Eldar must surely, certainly, have taken part. Not even that could break the downward trajectory of this culture. Not even that shock to the system. They were no longer the only race to command the stars. They had become so introspective and decadent that they did not even care when they would clearly have been ceding their dominance of the entire galaxy to others, the humans. Imagine the haughty and proud Eldari of today accepting such a fate if they could have their time over. Nay. The Eldar Empire, its entire culture, was rotten to the core, and was deeply self-loathing and utterly directionless. Yet it took the Eldar another 28 millennia of degeneracy to finally tip the scales and birth She Who Thirsts. And the fixation of Slaanesh for mortal souls is every bit as rapacious as its siblings, perhaps more so. Yet it is always the Eldar soul that it wishes to consume most of all. Is this because the Eldar have brighter souls, as most believe, or is this simply because it was generated by the Eldar, hence the irony of its appeals to the Prince of Pleasure? Or is it because it can consume other sustenance, as all Chaos gods are able, but that its true feast is not in power, but in mere bouquet? That the Eldar soul is its sweetest treat, as it is far more a creation of them than humanity, because it is actually different to the others on a very subtle but important level, just perhaps. Perhaps it all revolves around the souls of those who birthed them, as we have discussed before, but that the Eldar and human souls are not just different in their caliber. For most lore the Eldar as the most potent souls of all. But I personally believe that these perspectives are merely people being enamored of their psychic might. The soul does indeed power the psyche, but it is not a matter as simple as it was. For once the Eldar psychers, their farseers and warlocks, were known to be the most deadly and skilled psychic practitioners in the galaxy, the most knowledge in the use of the warp. They have an entire craft world-sized vessel just for their texts on the dark arts, their wisdom and arcane learning, the Black Library. Yet now, the human psyche can be more powerful than even they, not more skilled, certainly not more wise. But Alpha-class human psychers are far more well-endowed than the Eldar in psychic terms now. And the statement and law that all Eldar are psychers can lead to a halo effect, where this has commuted to them being the most powerful. But after the psychic awakening, the only dominance the Eldar have is now in skill. The human race now surpasses them in numbers and power, and could collectively swat them out of existence if combined into the one. I believe that the human and Eldar soul are utterly different. The ability to maintain coherency in the warp after death is another attribute regularly touted, which again leads to a feeling of superiority in the Eldar. But these are not the same thing. One day, I should explain my musings and observations in full, but for the time being, let us just say that I see the Eldar as a burning bright light, but the human soul as no less potent, just on a far more subtle plane of existence, with a far more subtle, yet telling, ability to change reality. And thus it is that we can see the 3 stages of Slaanesh, and I personally believe that they are mixed in their actual, timeline. For me, as I have stated in previous entries, the Dark Gods of Chaos show their actual genesis in the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future. And yet, the warp connects all of the different realms of the Warhammer universes. Hence, I believe that the Dark Gods began in the grim darkness of the far future, and yet, when they are birthed, they exist at all times and in all places in the warp. It is this which leads me to believe that the actual worlds of fantasy, the world that was, and then the Age of Sigmar, the realms, are younger than the Warhammer 40k setting, although it can be difficult to compromise the concept that a medieval setting is actually younger than that of the sci-fi. But as we can see, as we have heard, Slaanesh begins in might and majesty in both the fantasy realm and, of course, in the later Age of Sigmar. So, Slaanesh was born, and Slaanesh grew through the power of the elves in both realms, but it is in the 40k setting he was birthed. And we have seen the 3 different forms, because he may be seen as the youngest god in the fantasy setting, and yet he is very potent. Of course, in the Age of Sigmar, he is seen as the most powerful of all of the gods, even if only for a short time. And of course, as well, he is the one god who has actually been captured. But for that, I hope to one day go into some of those details when I bone up, possibly, on the Age of Sigmar. Don't hold me to that, though. I do have a lot on my plate. Now, we get to the crux of the matter. And so we have seen him as one of the 4 gods at the beginning of the fantasy realm, then the most powerful of the 4 gods in the Age of Sigmar. Even though he does slide from grace, he could always regain it. And we see his birth, and the reason why he is called the youngest god in the Genesis in the Warhammer 40k setting. Yet, as all of the different strains of Slaanesh state in all of the interpretations, he is potentially the most dangerous to the other gods, for within their excesses, he smiles back at them. Within their victories, their hauteur gives him power. With each of the defeats of the others, he gains in strength. Slaanesh is the most dangerous of all of the gods in the Warhammer setting, as he is slightly different to the others. In the Warhammer 40k setting, he is the god of dark chaos. He is the god of the Eldari's dark soul, and their needs and wishes were far, far worse than any others, because of the longevity, because doing something evil or bad or titillating can only be done the same way for so long. It is a pathway to excess, as each different entry, as each different action must be surpassed for the same level of enjoyment, of pleasure, of dark wrongness. Slaanesh is the most dangerous of all of the Chaos Guards. He may not be as powerful as Khorne on the field. He may not be as powerful as Tzeentch, some say. But he has the potential to consume the other guards, where Khorne and Nurgle could certainly not match, where Nurgle and Tzeentch are totally different. It is the Prince of Pleasure, it is the Lord of Excess, who holds a line on each of the Dark Guards and all of their followers. He is the only thing which could possibly combine the lot. He, or she, or it, Slaanesh, is the most dangerous guard in existence. He is the thing that the other gods fear.